Welcome back, students. This is going to be the last video that we do in this Intro to Excel Bootcamp course. I'm so happy to be joining with you guys on this last video. You're going to learn a lot of very useful tools in this last session. Some really cool things you can do within Excel and be able to further your knowledge into getting into some complicated data analysis and utilizing these skills to jumpstart your career and whatever you decide to do, and move on to even some more useful business analytics tools such as Power BI and more. Let's hop into the PowerPoint presentation and get started with our lecture for today. All right, everybody, we're here with Useful Tools Part 2 inside of Excel. Now, this video could easily be 2 to 3 hours long. We're going to try to keep it short and condensed, and we're going to utilize some of the basic functions and features of some of the tools that I'm going to be talking to you about. But I encourage you guys to look into these even more and really jumpstart and excel your journey within Excel and other Microsoft analytic tools. So, agenda for today, we're going to learn about the data model inside of Excel. If you guys have never done anything with relational databases before, no worries. We're going to go through it on a high level here, and then you can use this as a jumpstart to really dive into some of the core topics that we'll find in this video. We're going to talk about Power Pivot today as well, how it works with the data model, and we're going to talk about Power Query, how they kind of all work together. All right, so today, again, I'm using Windows. If you have any questions, Matthew, NGUYE 2023 at fau.edu. This video will be around 20 to 30 minutes. Now, again, I could do 3 hours of lectures on these videos with a bunch of different use cases, but we're going to keep this short, try to let you guys understand this as best as you possibly can, and we'll move on into other complex topics, hopefully in another course if I decide to do one. Hopefully in another course if I ever offer one at Florida Atlantic, I would love to. So make sure you leave us some feedback on how this course helped and impacted your journey in Excel. Before we jump into the workbook, as always, I wanted to throw some memes on here just to keep everything fun and relatable. The first one is me trying to trace down the reason for NA in cell B2. As you guys know, you guys can use something called trace precedent. In the formulas tab, you can actually trace formulas, and hopefully with some of the Excel knowledge that I taught you guys during this course, you won't have a lot of these issues. But you always know, as an Excel user, there'll always be some errors related to that. So the next one is, may the force of Power Query and Power Pivot be with you. We're going to get into some of that today. And the last one is a expansion of the mind meme, starting with Excel, next the pivot table, next the Power Pivot table, and then lastly Power BI, which is not going to be included in this course, but I really highly recommend you guys to go check out Power BI on your own. It's a very powerful business analytic tool, and if you get the good steps and a good foundation of Power Query and the data model and learning some DAX, you're able to really do a lot in Power BI just from the start. So hopefully I'll be able to even do a course on Power BI. That would be great. I use it a lot, and it's a great tool to analyze and visualize data in a quick and effective manner. All right, so what is the data model? The data model is a way for you to represent the data that you have in Excel. Now, the data sets we've been working with in this course so far have only been one table, but imagine you have multiple tables. The data model allows you to visualize the relationships between each table via some keys. And when we talk about keys, you'll see in later in this lecture how I'll kind of walk you through what those things are. But essentially, what a database is, or relational database in this sense, is a bunch of tables that just connect with each other based on a specific key. So remember, the key being the indicator that will lock each table together, and there are things like primary keys and foreign keys. All right, so it provides you a way to organize your data and allows you to look at multiple sources of data condensed into one, and it allows you to create, again, relationships between each table. So let's say we have an order table and we have a customers table. In the order table, we might have the customer ID in the order itself. So you can imagine a table with the orders, and we see all the orders, and then inside that order, we have a customer ID, and that customer ID will link to a customers table, and that customer ID will be a column in that customers table that you can connect back to the order. Again, we're going to get into some exercises so it can make a little bit more sense. The data models actually allows you to leverage functions that not only work on a line-by-line basis, but you can aggregate all of the data and cross-compute some pretty amazing formulas that allows you to multiply, divide, add, subtract, and even use some of Excel's built-in functions across multiple tables. What is Power Pivot? Now, all of these three tools kind of work together, but breaking them down piecewise so you can understand. Essentially, Power Pivot is the pivot table, but for multiple databases or multiple tables. So it allows you to manage and analyze large data sets. If you try to do this within Excel in a pivot table, you have to use something like a VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP to match some of the data. But utilizing the data model, you're actually working on top of the model that you build within Excel, so you don't have to have all that computing power of performing multiple functions on multiple rows and then kind of clogging up some of your Excel memory space. Next, with Power Pivot, you're able to create calculations, which are called DAX formulas. DAX means data analysis expressions. It allows you to analyze data from multiple tables and create calculations based on specific fields, as I mentioned on the data model slide. And again, Power Pivot really allows you to have efficiency within your Excel workbook, and you'll notice that the size of your workbook will actually be a lot smaller, which just means you can compute calculations faster and allow for less breaking of specific calculations because of the efficiency of the data model. So Power Query that allows you to actually import data from multiple sources. So this can be useful if you're pulling data from, let's say, an online database or a web page, or let's say you have a folder with multiple files in them, multiple Excel files or CSVs, comma separated value files, which allows you to condense the data together, even merge the data and make one big table essentially inside of Excel, or utilize the data in multiple tables and make some calculations. Also, you're able to clean data. Doing this, you can add columns that will do computations of the data as long as the data is structured similarly or the same, which will allow you to pull data in, do some calculations, do some condensing. Maybe you want to change some of the names. Maybe you want to add two names together in a separate column. So things like that. We'll get into some of that today as well. Power Query, again, allows you to automate some of these tasks that might take you hours on end or might take you a lot of formulas to do, and you'll do it outside of the actual Excel file, and it'll pull into the Excel file as a table, and this will allow for efficiency and better use within Excel. All right, guys, let's hop into the workbook now. Okay, awesome. So we have a bunch of different tabs here. We have the orders, we have products, we have regions, we have states, and we have customers. I'll move customers up here. So these are a bunch of different tables. Now, if we wanted to do a pivot table on our customers and get certain information about the number of orders that they had, we'd probably have to do some ifs and then bring in some of the products based on the order IDs and all of that kind of stuff. So without doing a bunch of formulas, and you can imagine if this data is very large, it's going to be a lot of work to do. Now, what we can do is we can actually add these to the data model. Now, before we start, I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Options, and ensure you have this Power Pivot tab on your ribbon. I'll go to Customize Ribbon, and if you scroll down here, you should see Power Pivot. I already have it added to my ribbon here. As you can see, I already have it added to my ribbon, but if I take it out, you should be able to find it here and then instantly add it over to this main ribbon tab. All right, guys, so we have some data within Excel, and now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have each of these tables added to our data model. Now, if we wanted to do an analysis of all of this data, we'd have to do some formulas in each field to utilize a relationship to do something like a pivot table. What we can actually do is just add all these to the data model. So what you want to do is you want to select the table, go to Manage, select the table, go to Add to Data Model. So we'll add this one, go to Customers, add this one, go to Products, add this one, go to Regions, add this one, and then go to States and add this one. All right, awesome. Turn my autosave on. All right, so what we can do here is after this, we can go to Manage in the Power Pivot tab, and now we're inside of our data model. We can see we have all our tables here. Cool, we'll come back to this view in a second. Let's go to Diagram View, and as you can see, we have these 5 boxes. These 5 boxes represent each table within our data model. Now, what we can do here is we can actually drag them and rearrange them. So I want to have the customers first. So I'll pull the customers over here. I'll pull the orders this way. Lays it out a little bit better. We can actually make them bigger. Make them a little bit bigger. All right, so we have customers, orders, let's put our products over here, put our products here. Let's put our regions down here, and let's put our states between the regions. All right, awesome. Now, if we want to make a relationship between each table, we can right click here, go to create relationship. I'll have the first table here. We want to link the customer ID to the orders table, and we want to link the customer ID from the orders table to the customer ID in the customers table. Click OK, and we'll have a connection here. Now, to delete this, let's say we made a mistake, we connection, click delete, and we can delete from the data model. Now, a faster way to do this is actually just to click the field and drag it to its related field. So we know the customer ID is going to link to the customer ID in the orders table from the customers table. We have this little line. And what this says, it says that there's one unique customer ID in the customers table, but there are many customer IDs in the orders table. That being the reason that maybe a customer has multiple orders. So let's connect the orders to the product ID, to the products. What we can do is drag this product ID to product ID. And now we have a relationship from our customers to our orders to our products. Now let's take the customer state ID. We have the state here. Let's link that to the state ID. And let's link the region to the region ID. All right, perfect. All right, so now we have our data model set up. What we can actually do is let's go back into our other view. So we'll go to the data view. And now let's say we want to make some calculations on our data. So we know that in the orders table, we have some order information here. So we have the quantity and the product ID. Now, if we look at the products table, we have the price and the cost. Now, what we can actually do to make a calculation is we can add a column here, and we can write an Excel formula like normal. So we can go to equals, and we know that the price minus the cost gives us the revenue per product. So we'll leave that there. We'll change this to gross profit per product. All right, what we can do now in the orders table, let's say we want to pull in all that data. So what we do is type in related, and now we have all the fields from all the other tables. So let's say in this one, we want to calculate the price of this order. We can do price, and let's multiply this by the quantity sold. Click enter. Awesome. So this will be the sales total. We can do the same for the cost. So we do equals related cost times quantity. Click enter. This will be our cost. Total cost. We'll change this to total sales so it's all the same. Okay, and let's do the revenue. So total gross revenue or total gross profit. Do this minus this, enter, and we get our total gross profit. So as you can see, we have our gross profit per product here, and now in our orders, we have the total gross profit. So we can actually add something called measures in each table. Let's say we want to get the total count of customers. So we can just write down here equals distinct count, and we'll pull in the customer ID to count how many customer IDs we have. And we have our measure, which is just a formula to calculate on each table. So in here, let's just change this to total customers. So let's go back to our orders table. And what we can do is we can do equals another formula here. Let's say we want to get our total profit. So let's just do the sum of our gross profit. Enter. Gross profit total. We can change this to a different format. You can go to the formatting here. Just change this to dollars. Let's take away the decimal places. Okay, so let's say we want to get the total gross profit per customer. So we'll do gross profit total. Divided by the distinct count of our order ID. Click enter. So that's our average gross profit per order. Now in this case, I did not create a measure for the total, for the distinct count of the orders. Or average gross profit. We have our average gross profit here. Let's create a measure for that. So let's create a measure for the distinct count of orders as well, and we'll change out that formula. This might be a little bit cleaner. So distinct count of our order ID. We'll name this total order number, orders. And let's change this measure out. Instead of doing the distinct count here, as you can see, we'll just change this out with our other measure, which will be total orders. Click OK. Okay, so let's do a measure for the average gross profit for customers. So let's do total gross profit total. And let's divide that by our other measure, which was customer total. Average gross profit per customer. All right, cool. So we get our average gross profit from customer. I'm going to change the formatting here. So now we have our average gross profit per order and our average gross profit per customer. All right, guys, so that's how you can add some measures, some calculations to the table in the data model. So let's exit out of here and let's do something with Power Pivot. If you want to add other measures as well and you don't want to go back into the data model, you can go to the measures here, click new measure. And the same way we added the different measures to the different tables, you can do so here and add it there. I like to do them on the actual table themselves and using the related function. But here, let's say you want to do a measure on the product table. You can do it here and do that as well. All right, so let's do an analysis now that we've done everything that we can to crunch the data as we like. So let's go to insert. We'll go to insert pivot table. Instead of from table or range or from external data source, let's go to from data model. So we'll do it in a new worksheet, click OK. So now we see the pivot table as we normally do. So let's look at the different measures and stuff here that we can do. So let's say we want to take an analysis of our customers. So let's do customer ID. So we have these customer IDs and we have our orders. So let's look at the total orders per customer. So in here, what we can do is we can add the total sales per customer as value. So we see here we have our total sales for our customers. Now, before we dive deeper, the customer ID isn't very helpful. So let's actually go back to our data model. So we'll go to the Power Pivot tab. Let's go to add data model. Let's go to manage the data model. So go back to the data model and let's actually add a full name for our customers. So in this column, okay, so let's say we want to add a full name column. So let's go here and let's add a column here where it's going to be their name. So let's do equals first name. So equals first name and space and last name. Okay. That will give us the customer full name. Let's do full name. Okay, so now we got our full name in our data model. Let's exit out of here. Let's go back to our pivot table. Okay, so let's now add the full name to the row so we can see our customers by full name. And let's do the total order for each customer. So they have the total orders for each customer listed here. And let's do the gross profit per customer. Okay, so now we have the total orders by customer and the gross profit for each of these. So let's just do customer name. Now, let's say we want to segment this out by the specific region. So let's pull the region in here and put it on top of the name. So we know that we have customers in these specific regions, and these are the totals here. Let's add a subtotal here for the region. So we have this being the subtotal for this region, this being the subtotal for this region, and this being the subtotal for this region. Really cool stuff that we can do here, guys. So we can utilize the data model to do an analysis over different data sets. Very cool, very awesome way of being able to actually compute some of this data, and allows us to look into multiple different tables and calculate different analysis on the specific info that we have. So let's try another one. Let's remove these. All right, so let's take a look at the different products that we have. So let's say we want to look at the different products and how much each product sold. So let's do an analysis on that. So let's take the product here, add it as the row. Let's take the region and add it as a column here. Okay, so let's say we want to take a look at the regions and the total sales per product. So let's go to the regions here. Let's add regions. Let's add the states in this case as well under each region. So we have all of the states under each region in this case. Let's take the look at the total gross profit per region. As we can see, these are the states that we're doing business in. And let's take a look at the average gross profit per order in each region. All right, awesome. As you guys can see, there's a lot of stuff that we can do within our data model and using the Power Pivot function. Now, let's say we want to take a look at some KPIs. So we'll run through that quickly. Let's go back to our region data. So let's do the regions here, and let's do the total gross profit per region. And let's say we want to add some KPIs, which are new key performance indicator. Let's click this. Let's look at our gross profit total, and let's see how many orders were under 1,200. So we know that any orders under 1,200 in this case would be our target. So let's say that if they're not at our target, then they're going to be getting this yellow, and if they're under a specific amount, let's say if they're under 950, then they're going to be getting a red symbol. So we'll click OK. We're going to have this weird column here. And what we can do is we can actually look into our orders and we can see our measure here. So what we can do here, let's remove both of these from this little light sign here. Let's click the value of the total profit and let's click the status. And now we can see which accounts met their targets and which one didn't based on this color coding. If you want to manage your KPIs, go to Manage KPIs and you can add them here and you can also delete them out. Okay, guys, that's the basics of the data model and Power Pivot. I'm going to change this to Power Pivot. Now let's move on into Power Query. All right, so let's say we want to pull some data from a bunch of different sources. Now we can get data from all these different sources inside of Power Query. You can pull from a database, you can pull from a web page, you can even combine queries. In this case, let's just pull from an Excel workbook so I can show you guys something that will allow us to utilize our data model as well. So let's say we have a bunch of Excel workbooks here. I'm a mess, man. Sheet options, and in a moment down at the bottom there's this drop down keys. And then over on the right hand side there started within Power Pivot. Let's go to the top left hand corner and click on Manage. This now opens up the core Power Pivot experience, and right now we just see this big blank white screen.
we need to bring some of our data into Power Pivot. So I showed you the data in an Excel sheet, and you can bring in data from many different places. Right here on the Home tab, we see this section called Get External Data, and you can get data from all sorts of places. Here, for example, I can get data from a database. You can also get it from other services, or here from other sources. Chances are, if you have...
All right, so let's get into Power Query. All right, so what we can do is we can go to Get Data. Let's do from a file and from a folder. Now we have this folder on my desktop where I have some information. I'm gonna click in here and I'm gonna click Open. Now I'm gonna get this binary content and all these weird things. What you can do here is you can combine these if these are the same types of tables. You can either load them in, but I'm gonna go to Transform Data because what I wanna do is I wanna make each one of these its own table. What I can do here is I got a bunch of Excel files with courses, grades, semester, student info, tuition info. I'm gonna click here. Exit here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click on this binary. I'm gonna do Add as a new query. Click into here. Click Court Tables. So what I'm gonna do next, I'm gonna right click on each one of these files and do Add as a new query. Click into here. I'm gonna use the courses table here. Click on this, load this in. I'll rename this query as courses. I'm gonna do the same thing for each one. Add as new query, click into this Excel. Right click on the tables, click table, do the same. Oh, that's not the fast way to do this. Okay, so what I can do here is I can go to Get Data, go from File. You can either get it from a folder. I'll get it from the Excel workbook in this case. So I have this Excel workbook where I'm going to be opening these up. And now the great thing about this is that I'm actually going to be manipulating the data inside of my Excel, but I will not be manipulating any of the data in the source file. So if I were to change this to hello and go back to the source file, the source data remains the same, but I can change stuff in here and manipulate the data without messing up any of the source files. So I'm going to undo this. I'm going to move this to the end. We got a lot of tables in here. I'll do this again. So I'll go to Data, Get Data from Excel Workbook. I'm going to do one for each one. Import. Click on the grades. All right, so now we added those two in. Let's go again, Excel Workbook, add the semesters, import. Now that we're looking at the semesters table, let's say we want to actually manipulate some of this data without changing the source file. Let's go to Transform Data, and this is going to be Power Query. So inside this Power Query modal, as you guys can see, there's a lot of stuff in here, a lot of information that we're not going to be able to go through this entire course. So now that we're in the Power Query editor, let's go over some of the things in here. So we can close and load our query here once we're done. We can refresh a preview here. We can look at some of the different properties and editors here. Some of this might get a little confusing for this course. We can remove columns, keep columns. We can split columns by delimiter. So let's actually do that. Let's say we want to split this into 2 columns. So let's do a delimiter here. And our delimiter will be a space Let's do the leftmost occurrence. Let's click OK. So now we have our semester and we have our year. Let's change this to year. Let's change this to just the semester. Great. So let's say we wanted to actually keep that main column and we wanted to add it again. Let's actually undo some of the stuff we did here so we can go to our applied steps and remove these. Let's click here. Let's do duplicate column. We can move this over and let's split that by the delimiter. Again, click OK. So we'll change this to semester type. Change this to year. All right, great. All right, great. You could also have done that with the start date, but just wanted to show you guys that example of splitting by delimiters. In this case, you can change the data type, you can merge queries, and you can do some other stuff over here. In the transform column, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do to the columns and the data in this case. And then in the add column, you can add a custom column. And then the view tab, you can look at the different views for your Power Query. But in this case, let's just exit out for now. So let's keep our changes. It's going to bring this data in. Let's do another one. Insert or data, get data from file, Excel workbook. Let's do the student info this time. Click import. Student info. Let's load this data in this case. Now we have, in our case, the student's first name, the student's last name. Let's go to add column. Let's do merge columns. The separator is going to be a space, and we'll name the new column full name. So every time we import data from this Excel sheet or an Excel sheet that we apply these steps to, these steps on the right-hand side will be applied. Let's pull the first name all the way over here so we have it right next to the first and last name. Okay, so in this case, we also have their current age. Let's say we only want to have it to the whole number, so we have some decimals here. Let's change this by going to the Transform tab. So we can click on here and go to Round Down, because if they're not the age yet, we're going to want to round it down to the whole number age. So we'll go Round Down, so that will give us their age. And as you see here, we have the steps here. If we want to undo that, we just click this, but we're going to keep that. So we'll go back to rounding. Go to round down. Let's look at the data more, see if we want to do anything else. Okay, so we have this payment received column. Let's make everything in here a number. So we can go here, go to whole number, change it to currency. Okay, looks good. Let's exit out of here by going to the Home tab, close and load. So as you can see in Power Query, you can actually edit the data without messing up the source data and add some different options while you're loading the data, which is great. Let's add the last table. So we'll go to data, get data from file. Let's add the tuition information. Let's import this again. Looks like we want to add, maybe we want to make this a currency again. So let's go to transform data. So it's processing the query. We'll change this again. Instead of whole number, we'll make it currency. Replace current. Okay, great. Everything looks good here. Let's close and load. We'll delete this sheet out. All right, so now we have these 5 different queries and connections. And now these are all inside of the actual data model. Okay guys, so we have all of our tables loaded in and we've added them to the data model. Let's go to manage, go back to the data model. Let's do another analysis on this data. So we'll go here. Again, we got the student, we got the grades, we got the student information. I'm just gonna move these around. We got the courses, got the grades, got the tuition, we got the semester. So what we'll do here is we'll make those connections. I'm going to move these around a little bit more. So we'll add the student ID to the grades, the semester ID to the semester ID, the class ID to the class ID. and the student ID to the tuition. All right, so that's how you utilize Power Query to bring data into your data model. I'm going to leave this here for you guys to do an analysis on this data, but I wanted to show you guys something else that you can do inside of Power Query. So now that we got the basics down of just Power Query, utilizing it from different Excel sheets, let's take it a step further. Okay guys, so let's jump into another example with Power Query and how we can use it in a more advanced manner. So what we want to do is we want to go to data and let's do get data from web. Now I'm going to show you guys a website that shows some financial statements of different companies. Let's say we want to take a look at the financial statements of Amazon in this case from wallstreetjournal.com. So what we can do is we can paste this URL into the Power Query window. So we'll click that. And basically any web page that has a table on their web page, such as this, you'll be able to pull data from it and keep it up to date as such. So what we want to do is we want to actually transform this data here. So before we load it, we want to transform it because there's some things that we're going to want to do. So let's change this to income statement. That'll be the table name. Now it's going to have this change type applied step. We want to take this step out because you never know how the data is going to be structured on a web page. And in this case, it's changing some of these things to text and it's changing, based on their names. So we're not going to actually need this. So as you guys can see, they got the financial statements here. Let's remove some stuff. So we want to remove this 5-year trend. Let's remove this. And okay, so we have this. That looks good. Let's actually move this into date format from left to right. So we'll just move the columns over. Super powerful way to manipulate and change data. So let's look here again. Okay, everything looks good. Let's click close and load. Delete this sheet out. All right, so we got our income statement for Amazon here. It's got all the data from that web page pulled in. And if we want to refresh it, all we have to do is right click here and click refresh query. Now let's do something that's a little bit more useful that you can apply to specific web pages if you'd like to do it on your Excel journey inside of Power Query. Just realize that my coat is up, so do that. All right, so let's say we want to do stock symbol where we have a cell that has a stock symbol that we want to look up. So in this case, we had AMZN, which is Amazon, but let's say we want to do a different stock like BAC, which is Bank of America. So let's say we want to do an analysis on a list of stocks. So let's open up another sheet and we'll call this stock tickers. Now, let's say we have a JSON file that we want to bring in that data from, which is another way you can actually get information in Power Query. So JSON just stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Don't really worry too much about what that necessarily is. So here I actually have a download of the company tickers from the website sec.gov, which has all the information. So I'm just going to import that file here, loading up, and then inside of Power Query, we have this weird formatted data, right? So what can we do with this? What can we do with this? We have the ticker here, but how do we get this information? So there's actually into a table method that has that's inside of Power Query. So we're going to insert that step. Now it'll load everything into a table. What we can do here is click this little button and select all columns. We only want the ticker in this case and the title. So we'll click OK. Okay, cool. So we have the ticker. We'll change this to ticker or ticker symbol. Insert. And we'll change this to company name. Click insert. Okay. Delete that out. I don't know what that is. We'll close and load. Cool. So we got all this. Not quite sure what this came from, but let's just say number in this case. So we got this data. Cool, cool, cool. What we want to do here is we're going to create a data validation list. So we'll go to data. Remember this from last lesson, validation. We'll create a list. We'll choose the list from here. We'll go. There we go. Click enter. All right, so now we got all the different stock data, all the different tickers that we'd want to use. In this case, to make this actually even a little bit easier, let's actually do an X lookup here, where we can look up this value in the company tickers so that we know we have the right company name. Forgot to do a comma right there. All right, so we got the company, and then we got the ticker. So what we can do is we're going to name this cell stock symbol so that when we change this, these financial statements will update. So let's do it. Let's go back to the Power Query editor for this, for the income statement. What we're going to want to do is let's go to Advanced Editor. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to manipulate this string. Let's name this stock symbol. And we'll do Excel.current workbook. This is all boilerplate code, so just feel free to copy and paste this if you would like, or you can look into how to write these specific queries inside of Power Query, which will help you in the future. But for this course, we are going to be limited to the amount of time, so you can just feel free to copy onto this. We're going to change this to stock symbol, which is just the name of that cell that we named in that specific cell. We're going to close this out and write content at the 0 index, 0, and then it's going to be column number 1. Okay, cool. Let's do a comma here to end this statement. And now you see here how Amazon is in between here. So if we go to this website, let's Google Chrome real quick. Go to this website, we're going to get Amazon's income statement. Now, if we change this to BAC, Bank of America, we'll get Bank of America's income statement. So what we want to do is we want to just get that cell that we have in our Excel sheet to change this to that specific symbol. So that's what we did here. We named the variable here. So we're going to do quotation marks. We're going to add 2 ampersands, just like when you're writing in Excel. And we're going to write stock symbol here. Click done. Let it load. Okay, great. As you can see, the first step here is it's changing the actual stock symbol. So we have MRK here, which not really sure what company that is, but we'll look later. Let's just check our steps. So our steps are good. We remove the columns or we reorder the columns. Make sure that's all good. Let's close and load. Let's change this to Bank of America. Let's refresh. And boom. Now you have the ticker and the company name and this information here. That's just some of the power that Power Query can do. There's a lot of other things that you guys can do inside of Power Query, but basically for the quick overview of what Power Query does, it allows you to get data from different sources, manipulate and change data, clean data up, as you guys saw in the 2 examples, and allows us to bring data in without manipulating the actual source. And in this case, actually pulling in live data from a website, which is really cool because it allows us to do a bunch of different things with real-time data. In this case, we're doing some stuff with stocks. All right, guys, so let's look at one more exercise on how you can use Power Query to clean your data. We're going to go to Get Data. We're going to go from Excel Workbook. Now, I'm going to go into a folder where I have some sample data here. So click in here, go to Sales Quarter. Let's import this data. All right, so now we got our sales data. which are not formatted in tables, but they are in each tab. So we're going to select all of them. Okay, cool. Let's go into transform data. Okay, great. So now we have multiple tables, and we want to merge them to be all into one. So how can we do this? I'm going to create a new group here and move these out. I'm going to name this sales by quarter. Okay, I'm going to move these into there. All right, so now I got each table from the Excel sheet. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to append queries as new. So 3 tables or more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to append Q2, Q3, and Q4. I'm going to click OK. All right, as you guys can see, now all the tables are merged. We can come here and click change, and we can click here and change this to currency. So now that we have this in currency, and now we can either close and load, or we can continue with the data here and do some other validations if we'd like to do so. Now we have a little problem here. What if we wanted to actually get some more data in relations to where these specific tables came from? For example, what quarter they were in based on that tab. This is one way you can aggregate all the data into one. And I guess you can find out that based on the month. You can do a calculation to find that out. But I'm going to show you another way to actually combine these tables. So I'm actually going to exit this out. I'm going to delete this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to Q1, and I'm actually going to change this by taking out these applied steps. And at the source tab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this data and click this open double arrows here. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to click OK. And now I get all the data with the name from the tab they came from and the rest of the data as well. So what I can do here is let's start removing some things we don't need. So I'll remove this hidden. I'll also remove this kind. We don't really need it. Okay, so everything's looking kind of good here. The item number is the same as the name. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to change name to quarter. Okay, now we have this data, and it looks pretty good, but the only thing that is kind of off here is that we want the actual, the first row. First of all, let's make these the headers. First row is headers. I'll rename this to quarter again. And we have these weird account IDs, headers in the middle of our data. So what we can do here is we can come here and let's just filter out account ID, click OK. And now we have the quarters, the account ID, the account name, the month, and then the total sales. Again, we can transform this, change this to a currency. And from here, just like the other append queries tab that we did, now we have everything in one. I'm going to change this to all quarters. And I can go ahead and delete these other queries. Click OK. And now I have all the data that I need, so I can close and load. And boom, now I have all the data that I need, and I can do as I want with this data. And this is pulling from that source data, so we know that everything's still structured over there. And now I can do the analysis that I need for this exercise. That's just another way that you can clean data within Power Query. There are so many other ways that it would take me hours on end to do. But in the case of the exercise that I have attached, you'll be doing some stuff with interest rates. So feel free to do as you please on that exercise. Feel free to manipulate the rest of the data that we had here earlier in the students' information. I would do a power pivot here and maybe make some custom formulas that allows you to manipulate the data here, where you can look at the different students and maybe how much their GPA is on average, and then the average GPA by courses. So Power Query and Power Pivot and the data model all work together. They're very, very important when you're doing analysis in the business world, and allows us to work efficiently with the different things that we're working on in terms of keeping real-time data relevant in our Excel files and staying up to date with the most freshest and cleanest data that we possibly can. Utilize these fundamental steps that I taught you guys to further on your Excel journey. I hope you guys enjoyed this last lesson. Feel free to try the exercise and try some of the stuff that I told you to do in this video. Feel free to email me with any questions, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the course with all the exercises and quizzes attached, and I hope you guys learned a lot from this module.